any questions? Ms. David.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I'm Ms. David and I represent BCG. Are you familiar with BCG's case?
I'm sorry, I'm not, no. I haven't lived in Australia for 36 years and I haven't certainly had a chance to look through the files.
Well, BCG was one of the witness statements and gave evidence at this commission. Have you haven't had the opportunity to read her evidence or to look at her statement?
I haven't, I'm sorry. The reason I came here was to care for my ailing father, and that's taken a lot of my time. Plus, I wasn't aware of the fact that I would be called before the Commission.
I understand that, Mr. Jackson, but just do you not think that it is important, and I appreciate your own personal circumstances, it's not a criticism, but do you appreciate that it is very important for people in such senior positions as yours to really have a good understanding of the perspective of a survivor of abuse as BCG is?
I agree with that comment, and let me say I empathise. I don't know the details of what happened to the person you're representing, but I certainly empathise with whatever tragedy he or she has had to face.
But you agree that unless your organisation takes organises some research or study into the plight of people such as BCG, that will never really understand how the processes you have in place affect them.
That is a valid comment.
And at this stage, would you agree that you have not really undertaken or organised to undertake any such research or studies into the experience of people, young people or people of any age that have been abused within the organisation?
That is a little hard for me to say, give a definitive answer. Within the parameters of how we normally do research for our publications and so on, and the fact that our service departments are handling cases such as your client, they have considered a lot of the approaches that we've taken, and that's why we have changed things. And I'm sure the policies have changed since the time the person you were representing was actually helped or handled.
Just remaining on that point, you're aware that a Dr. Monica Applewhite gave evidence before the Commission?
I am aware, but I certainly didn't get a chance to see it. I apologise.
Are you aware that she was provided with some documentation or some witness statements from the Jehovah's Witness elders, but she was not provided with any witness statements from the survivors of abuse that have been provided during the course of this proceedings?
I'm sorry. I really am not in a position to say anything about it because could I just explain, as empathetic as I am to the case, what I would hope for is that at the end of this commission, those who have had far more experience than I have in this subject will be giving recommendations to the governing body.
I appreciate that, and certainly I've certainly noted what you have said in the evidence today. I just want to make the point that can you understand how people like BCG, who have had nothing but just really very traumatic experiences, feel very concerned when they feel that their voices are not being listened to at all by the senior members of your organisation?
I'd be very disappointed if that's the case, and certainly I would hate for that impression to be given to the person you're representing. Well,
and so in your efforts to ensure that in the future the processes will be reviewed to ensure that the perspective of the abused person is given proper heed, would you do you think it would be a good idea for your organisation to actually conduct some sort of research?
I think the more information we can get, the better, because all of us are trying to deal with a very horrific problem, and any amount of information we can get would be beneficial.
I just want to make the point here, it is a very horrific problem, but the problems that have been, that BCG and others like her have experienced are compounded by their experience by having to go through the processes within your own congregation. So what I'm saying, it's a universal problem, but there are specific issues that clearly just relate to how the Jehovah's Witnesses have been dealing with it. So I guess what I'm suggesting, how important it is that it be a review that have specific regard to your processes.
I take your point as a valid point.
Just want to come to, on the issue of BCG, I know you're not aware of her case, but I will just very briefly give an overview, having regard to trying not to take too much time. But she made a complaint. It was ultimately, initially there was, because of the one witness rule, it was not accepted. Ultimately, on an appeal and with a confession, there was an acceptance of her complaint. She essentially did not make a full complaint to the authorities until after she left the congregation, I think approximately 15 years later. But in the interim, when the abuse was by her father, in the interim, approximately 7 years after she was initially abused, she learned that her father, BCH, had been reinstated back into the church. That's a very pocket view, short history, but upon that event, she wrote an impassioned 5-page letter to the head office in Australia about her position and sought help. What she also sought was an assurance that the matter would be handled. She was leaving it absolutely. Her issue was entirely, this is a devout young Jehovah's Witness woman, she was leaving it in the care of the Jehovah's Witness church to do something. And she wrote a letter. She said, "Now I can only leave the matter in your hands and pray Jehovah directs the outcome, whatever it may be." But she implored head office to Bethel not to ignore the letter and to do something about the terrible situation. She explained about her suicide attempt. She explained the devastation to her and to her sisters who were also abused. What was sent back to her was a letter, and if it could look at please at Tender Bundle 30.
Yes, I have it here.
You have that letter. This was after 7 years of this. BCG has given evidence that after she made the complaint, that she did not receive any assistance or certainly sufficient support, or even scriptural support. But if you could look at that letter, you can see that it says, firstly, always throw your burden on Jehovah. Can you see that in the second paragraph?
In the second paragraph, yes, I can.
Yes. She was also told about the heartwarming prayer of David is appropriate, where he entreated Jehovah to preserve his tears in a skin bottle. She has given evidence here to the effect that she felt silenced by what she was told. And she also said, and what she was essentially advised, if you go to the third paragraph, is that that with Jehovah's help and your own effort, you can look forward to the new world of peace. But she was really given no solace to deal with what was going to continue to be very painful for her in this world. Do you agree with that? read through that letter.
So, yes, and this is the first time I've seen the letter. My apologies. But I would agree with you that if this is the only help she got, certainly that is not enough. But as I said, I don't know the case. What help did the elders give her personally? What are the circumstances? But I agree with you that something far more than a letter like this would be required to help her.
And do you also appreciate that it could in fact be even some strict reliance on just giving scriptural guidance to someone who has suffered extreme trauma can in fact result in even a more damaging outcome for that particular person? Do you accept that?
What I accept is that sometimes when a letter is written, it's very hard to convey the spirit behind the letter. Yes. I certainly would expect as a member of the governing body that anyone writing a letter from a branch would do so in the spirit of love and concern. So perhaps, but I do admit that if someone read this, they perhaps could not see that love and concern.
And we accept that by what she has said in her letter, which was, now I can only leave the matter in your hands, and I won't, it's a 5-page letter that there's not enough time to go through clearly here now, but throughout that letter she is seeking assistance, guidance, help. She's told you about the trauma she has experienced, but there's a real duty, isn't there, to do something about the overall well-being of a person such as BCG.
I agree with what you said. They need far more than just one letter.
And do you agree that given the special nature of the congregation, as I think you have said before, that it's not just a case of congregation where people turn up and go to church, it's a family, that there is therefore an even greater duty within that family to ensure that people like BCG are cared for in a comprehensive way?
I agree totally with you, probably more so than you realise. Each sheep in the congregation is someone that needs to be cared for and loved, and I find it very, very hard to believe that this was the only hope that was given to her, and if in fact that was the case, my heart goes out to her, and certainly we need to make sure that more help is given than this.
And I just want to come back to the point I made before about, or the questions that I asked you before in relation to ensuring that there was some research done. For example, Dr. Applewhite came here and really to really say that the education program was a good one and perhaps better than some others, but there was no research to demonstrate how effective, in fact, the Jehovah's Witness program was. And again, I apologise for the length of my question, but I'm trying to get to a point, which is that it is really disheartening for the survivors that evidence from people such as Dr. Applewhite, without any reference whatsoever to the victim's experience, suggests to them that the reason for engaging experts is to, in fact, rather, if I can say, it has more to do with the reputation of the Jehovah's Witnesses than any real attempt to get to a deep understanding of their experience.
I certainly hope that is not the case, and that certainly was not the intent of it. So please be assured that we are interested in the individuals such as the client that you're representing.
I just want to go back to...
Please,
sorry.
And may I take this opportunity, I don't know your client, but please could you convey an expression of my love and concern and reassure her that obviously she's had an opportunity to speak about how she feels, and hopefully this will help the policies and procedures to improve.
I want to now go to something a little bit, if I can say, more technical. If we go to document Tender Bundle 120, at page 72, which I think is... Page 72. I just want to ask you, it refers there to the testimony of youth as being under paragraph 37, where we're looking at evidence established wrongdoing, and just how the Jehovah's Witness would view the testimony of youth. I note that it says there, the testimony of youths may be considered, it is up to the elders to determine whether the testimony has the ring of truth. Just in relation to that, firstly, how would you define a youth? Are you able to do this?
As someone still in a family arrangement under the legal age. But perhaps in this context, I'm sure it means probably someone younger. So,
is there some doubt about the testimony of youth, that you wouldn't accept that it would carry less weight perhaps than the testimony of an adult? I'm just trying to understand what the basis for that is. Pardon?
Thank you very much for asking the question. It's a very good question. May I just mention, this is in the context of general disputes or things that may be handled. And could I give you an example that is not related to the Commission? It could be, say for example, a mother and a father decide to separate, there's a divorce, and now the children, maybe the mother has primed the children to say certain things about the father in order to get custody of the child. Now, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses are not involved with deciding if parents, how they do divorces and so on. But you see, in a case like that, in the testimony of a child, you'd have to take in consideration in that situation whether or not they were influenced by one of the parents or otherwise. It's just only a caution to make sure that the evidence is credible. But may I stress, this is a general principle across all the type of things that we're handling.
Can I just understand? I'm not quite sure I'm understanding. Wouldn't it be the case that you would have to consider the evidence of anyone to determine whether it had the ring of truth, whether they were a youth, child, or adult? What's the difference?
That is true, Your Honour.
Well,
that is true.
Why are...
To start, could I just say, with regard to sexual abuse, we've already made the statement that the child would be believed. But in these general principles that I tried to highlight with regard to a divorce or some other things, perhaps a child who's dependent upon a parent may be influenced in some way by them.
So this is here to mark out the risk that someone's evidence might be influenced by another person, including an adult.
That's correct, Your Honour, yes. And it's only a reminder. It's in no way designed to say that children cannot give evidence.
Very well.
Just in relation to, given that you've categorised the testimony of youth, is there any other, the testimony of children, is there, the testimony of children is not mentioned at all there, so I'm just concerned as to whether the testimony of children would have even lesser weight because of the age of a child and perhaps their vulnerability to influence.
I'm not quite sure of your question, I'm sorry, but this is just in the context of, like you see, the next bullet point mentions the testimony of unbelievers and disfellowship or disassociated ones. It says may also be considered. So again, if someone has disassociated themselves, perhaps they have a grudge against someone in the organisation, but this person is credible in giving a witness, they could give a testimony. So it's just giving some general guidelines, common sense, nous type things to those that are handling these cases, but in no way is it designed to stop these ones.
I was going to ask you about this bullet point, but you took us to it. It separates out the testimony of unbelievers and disfellowshipped or disassociated ones, says that it may be considered, but it must be weighed carefully. It suggests to an outsider that what the document is doing is expressing a need for extra caution when it's the evidence of an unbeliever as opposed to a believer that's being considered. Is that a correct reading of the document?
The reading of the document is saying someone who doesn't agree with or feel the same way we do about the scriptures, perhaps may take a different viewpoint on certain things. For example, the matter of lying. You see, Jehovah's Witnesses endeavour to be truthful and present facts in a truthful manner. Someone who is not a witness may have no difficulties at all about telling a lie. I'm not saying, Your Honour, that no Jehovah's Witnesses are perfect, but that's just a reminder there that these ones perhaps could make a false statement.
So my assumption is correct that the document is saying be more careful with the evidence of unbelievers than you would be with the evidence of believers. Is that right?
That's what it says. Yes, Your Honour.
Sorry, just to be clear on the issue of the testimony of a child. Again, is there an age that you might define a child, compared with a youth to make that distinction? Is there any age category or some criteria that you would use? Or
sorry, I wish I could answer your question, but I think that goes to people more qualified than I am.
But just coming to that, would that be an area that you would review in the context or in relation to any wrongdoing, but particularly in relation to, obviously, the matters in issue here, in relation to the testimony of youth? Because do you agree that that could very much confuse an elder who took that literally to, begin with a level of scepticism about the testimony of the youth?
Your point is well taken, and that's why we update this book from time to time when we see perhaps inadequacies in it.
And that as a whole, it might, by omitting reference to a child, it might make the reader consider, well, what is the status of the evidence of a child? Does it have any value at all?
There's all other points.
Yeah. Just an argument. When you were answering questions earlier to counsel assisting, and Your Honour, you clearly seemed open to the idea that perhaps prior to the Judicial Committee it might be an opportunity for women to be involved in that preliminary, if I could say, preliminary investigative stage. I'm just coming down to the point of where it says there must be 2 or 3 eyewitnesses, not just people repeating hearsay. I just see that if you look at that point there, that there must be 2 or 3 eyewitnesses, not just people repeating hearsay, that you would really have to formalise a process whereby if an abused person spoke to, for example, a couple of female sisters, that wouldn't then just take on the character of a hearsay evidence. Do you understand the point I'm making there?
I understand your point, and yes.
I just guess what I'm saying is that when you are looking at policies, do you agree that it would be worthy of ensuring that that did not perhaps confuse an elder attempting to interpret this policy, that in fact it would diminish the value of involving women at that point?
It's a good point, and let me say we're always interested in trying to improve whatever we do.
So again, just coming back to the scriptures, that again clearly, as BCG was a very devout young Jehovah's Witness, that the importance of ensuring that whatever scriptural guidance a devout Jehovah's Witness survivor is given, that it is, you know, it just can't come from a one-size-fits-all scriptural package. Do you agree?
I agree totally. I do agree totally.
That it must be tempered with, by having real experts consider how a young person like BCG might internalise certain scriptures in a way that is ultimately quite destructive.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? No? Mr. Bannon, no?
No.
Mr. Stewart, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, Your Honour.
Yes, very well. Well, that completes your evidence, sir. Thank you very much for your time today. You're now formally excused from your summons.
Thank you.
Mr. Stewart.